So today's guest is someone I met not through research paper or social media, but right here in Western Australia when she came to Perth to take on the Rottnest Channel Swim. Dina Levačić is one of the world's most accomplished marathon swimmers. She has completed the Ocean Sevens, widely regarded as the Everest of open water swimming, and did so at an age when most athletes are only just discovering the sport, becoming one of the youngest swimmers to ever complete all seven iconic channel crossings. Her swims span some of the coldest, longest, and most demanding bodies of water on the planet, including the English Channel, North Channel, and the Cook Strait. Environments that test not just the physical endurance, but judgment, resilience, and adaptation over time. What makes Dina especially interesting is that her journey didn't stop with completing these swims. She's now a PhD researcher at the University of Split in Croatia, where she's studying the physical and psychological experiences of marathon swimmers and channel swimmers, asking questions that most of us can only reflect quietly on, if at all. This conversation is about what happens when someone who has truly lived the extremes of open water swimming turns around and asks, what is actually happening to us? And what can we learn from it? Dina, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. And yeah, it's nice that technology allows us to communicate from different sides of the world.
It certainly is. So, Dina, most people know you as an Ocean 7 swimmer,
Mm.
but fewer people know that you're also a PhD researcher studying the lived experience of marathon swimming. Do you remember the first moment you realised that what swimmers experience and what the literature talks about didn't always line up?
Well, when I was doing like a first research about for my research, looking at the literature, even the one that exists, it's like very small in numbers compared to some other areas. And it's mostly like case studies or some small samples or more like looking into physiological aspects of some health issues or looking at the prevalence in general, what can occur. And there was no mention of what people actually experience, how they deal with it, and what's behind the health issues. Because, as you may know, someone, for instance, like hypothermia is one of the most common health issues that can occur. But saying just like hypothermia doesn't mean much. It can go from basically nothing to close to that experience. But then again, experience of the people that go through it are also very different. So I think for like the future open water swimmers or maybe current open water swimmers that are looking for new challenges, something more, it's very important to know what those who I would say are some of the most experienced marathon swimmers in the world, how they experience these things so they can prepare themselves and know what to expect.
So, was there a moment when you first thought this is something worth studying and not just living?
Yeah, well, as I told you before, as I am self-funded in my PhD, I was looking like, oh, what can I do with no money, but that has, worth for the marathon swimming community. And then I came up with this idea, and I think it's something that is quite relevant. And my idea in the end is maybe to even have some like booklet or something, online available for anyone who wants to read it. So, as I said, so that they can know what's ahead of them, because most of the marathon swimmers are people in their, middle aged, as we would say. So, the average swimmer of English Channel is just over 40. So those are people who already get into the age where health issues are more common, especially like cardiovascular health issues, which is mostly the cause of that usually when it happens. So I think that those people need to be aware of all of the risks lurking around the corner, even though marathon swimming is quite safe compared to some other activities. For instance, compared to like Mount Everest, climbing the Everest, the death rate compared to English Channel, I think it's like, I don't know, I'm not sure now, but like 5 times less for English Channel. So it's quite safe, but still, one death is one death too much. So
And when you were in Perth, You spent some time with us in our little research project
Yeah.
looking at SIPE. So, your experiences, although there's one aspect you're looking at in your project, at the same time, you're very open to exploring all the different components to healthy swimming.
Yeah, I love anything that has to do with open water swimming. So I just turned 30 and I did my first open water swim when I was 9. So I've been basically doing it most of my life. And I grew up by the sea. I learned how to swim in the sea. I would go fishing with my granddad. So I don't have a fear a lot of people in Croatia are afraid of the deep water and things like that. So I just love anything to do with open water swimming. So I was so happy when I found out that there is a group of people who actually do some serious research about this subject, especially about SIPE, which is quite misunderstood and not taken seriously enough, I would say, also by a lot of swimmers who even know about it. So yes, I'm open to do anything that has to do with open water swimming. If I am a test subject, if I'm a researcher, if I'm in any way involved, I'm all yes for that.
Now, you've completed some of the hardest swims in the world. While you were doing them, were you already noticing patterns in pain, recovery, and mental states?
Yeah, so I started my channel swimming journey when I was 21 in 2017. So that's when I did my first big solo swims. And I think back then I was still like a kid and I was not aware of many things. But throughout the years, through my experiences and through meeting other swimmers and talking with them, I think that some things just like came up that became normal that are not normal, like normalization of pain. Like it's the most common thing that you get, shoulder pain during the swim. It's most common thing that you throw up during the swim or feel at least nauseated. It's not like, oh my God, it happened. It was like, yeah, it happened. It's expected. And I think that shows how strong those people are, like physically and mentally, but it also can be quite dangerous because I feel that line is being pushed further and further, so sometimes it gets very blurry. And from my experience, from some stories that I know from other people, it comes down also a lot to your support crew and who you have on the boat, which is very, very important. Because if you don't have someone who knows you really, really well and who has your best intentions and your health on the first place, it can get quite dangerous. For instance, I have my mom on the boat, and there is no way my mom would let anything happen to me. But sometimes, if you have on the boat someone who's who values success of the swim maybe a bit more than your health, it can get quite dangerous. I heard, as I said, some stories that are quite worrying. And I'm happy that I see that a lot of like pilots and a lot of associations that oversee these swims and their observers, they are trying to teach them how to recognize certain health issues and when the swimmer is in danger. So, as you know, in the end, pilot and observer are both people that can stop the swim and like overdrive the crew or the swimmer. So I think that's also quite important, and I'm happy that I'm seeing progress in the world. But I think that there is still like a large gap that needs to be filled, and I feel that people are not against the knowledge, they just don't know, they don't have it in certain situations. So yeah, they don't know what they don't know. Yeah.
And from your own experiences, what surprised you most about your responses in these swimming environments?
Well, for instance, for my last swim in St. Helena, so that was my longest swim. I swam for 17 hours. And I honestly, when I touched the finish, I had no idea how I finished. I was like, yeah, I have no idea how I managed to do this. So just the ability of my body and my mind to push through, it just surprises me every time. And it's so amazing how much we can do, how much more we can do than what we think while we sit on the sofa at home. And so that's why I think that anyone should try something challenging and something that pushes themselves to see how much they can actually do. It doesn't have to be extreme as 17 hours, but what's 17 hours for me, maybe it's 1 hour for someone else. So I think that's what open water tells me the most, that I can do much more than I think.
So I'd now like to move towards your first study within your PhD. Your paper that you're working on at the moment focuses on the health risk and adaptation in channel swimmers. What were you actually trying to
Yeah.
understand that previous research wasn't addressing?
Well, we were trying to actually get the perspective of the swimmers themselves. As I said, there's some studies that more just list health issues that can occur during these big swims, but none of them actually talk about what swimmers go through and how they deal with it, and how they see those health issues, how they reflect on them. But also, there was even less literature when it comes to prevention measures that swimmers use. And I think that's very important part of the journey. So the idea was to look at health issues not just during the swims, which most papers look at, that I read, but also health issues during preparation phase, during the swim, and after the swim as a effect of the swim itself. And the results we got, mostly like health issues that people get, are the ones that already mentioned, in the literature. But the experiences they get and some of the like quotes I got are quite emotional and descriptive. And as I said, the normalization of pain is quite common. And what's worrying is that some health issues, even among these some of the most experienced swimmers in the world, are still there is gaps in knowledge about some of those health issues. For instance, like after drop, I'm quite sure that all of those swimmers I interviewed experience after drop, but maybe just I think that like two or three of them even mentioned it, and it can be quite dangerous phenomenon. So for instance, one thing that occurred to me also that I didn't know what it is at the time was transient global amnesia. So it's basically like gaps in you are completely functional, you do everything, but you don't remember anything later. So those are some like things that people experience, but maybe are not aware that they are experiencing it. And when you realize that the problem exists with people who some of them have been swimming for like I don't know, I think for over 50 years, and the criteria for inclusion was that they finished at least two of Ocean 7 swims. So those are people who have experience. So then you think, but how it is then with someone who is just starting? They probably have no idea what's ahead of them. So that's what we are trying you know, to spread the knowledge. And in the end, we came up with actually the model. It's a circular model of health and adaptation, which shows that health in marathon swimming, it's not linear. So every phase affects the other phase. So how you train and prepare, it affects how you deal with health issues during the swim, or for instance, health issues during your swim affect your recovery, and so on, so on. But for instance, for a hypothermia that is quite common and quite well recognized, I would say one of the health issues that is the best recognized, I would say, because it's talked about so much. And in the recent years, there's quite a lot of research in that subject also. So I think it's more in the spotlight, so people are more aware of it. But there was a description of hypothermia when someone said that it's like someone is stabbing you with 1,000 knives. So it's like a death of 1,000 knives. So I think that's also quite important to. It's okay to know that okay, hypothermia occurs, but how does it feel? How do you explain to someone? How do you know that you are getting hypothermic? What's the feeling you are looking for? So some of those descriptions are quite like out there. Or instance, for nutrition, when we talked about nutrition with swimmers, it was quite funny. So you probably know that marathon swimmers, it goes from energy drinks that are like normal stuff, I would say, to like sandwiches, chocolate, porridge, I don't know, jelly beans, and meat. And one swimmer told me that when he was doing Cook Straight, both pilot was eating like meat pie, and it started to like, the smell of it was for him, he was like, "Oh, I'm jealous of you. Do you have one more?" And they had one more. So he was in the middle of the ocean treading water and eating a meat pie. Uh, so I think that stories like that show how special the community is, and how inclusive it is, and how it's not one of those sports when you need to follow every rule of the like performance to be successful, but for sometimes you just need a meat pie to take you to the other side.
You mentioned after drop. Could you just describe that? Because as you said, a lot of the times swimmers aren't actually aware of what these things are.
Yeah, so it's actually a phenomenon that it's not that well researched, but basically most of the people think that once you get out of the cold water, that that's like the most dangerous part is behind you, and then you get that rest and you are okay. But the truth is that your core temperature actually drops for 30 minutes after you exit the water. So you are in the biggest danger zone after 30 minutes after exiting the water. So a lot of people sometimes, if you go for a community swim, when you get out, you don't dress immediately, but you walk around, talk to people, unaware what's happening in your body, and that is getting more dangerous. But also, a lot of people sit behind the wheel, which can be also quite dangerous. And I actually participated in a study at University of Portsmouth, where they were looking at the effects of cold water swimming on driving performance. I think the paper is not out yet, unfortunately, but hopefully it will be soon. But those are some things that are, it doesn't sound important when you talk about after drop as it is, but when you put it together with some other aspects, it can get quite dangerous because if your temperature drops a lot, you can, I don't know, I don't want to say pass out, but you can lose your, how do you say, dexterity? I don't know that word, dexterity, or your reflexes can go down, or your concentration can go down. And in a lot of situations, that can get quite dangerous, especially if you are alone and have no one to help you.
Now, you also mentioned that you've chosen channel swimmers and those that have done the Ocean Sevens channels. This is quite a very specific subgroup. Why have you chosen that over just the general open water swimmers?
Well, I had to choose someone, and I was looking who would be like who has the most experiences, and who has the best stories in the end, and who has also the most knowledge about the things I wanted to talk about. So decision fell into those who finished two or more Ocean Seven swims. Not to say that other people don't have anything to say, but I think that, so I did interviews with 30 people from all over the world, and I honestly can say that I interviewed some of the best of the best. For instance, like Sarah Thomas, Cameron Bellamy, Linton Mortensen, Australian guy, or many others who are the cream of the crop, how you say, or something like that. So I was thinking that if someone went through a lot of things, those are these people. And what I mentioned earlier, when you see that these people have like gaps in knowledge in certain areas, then you are like worried, get very worried about the other ones who did so far less swimming or are getting ready to do more. But in my next study, that hopefully will be going soon, I will be looking into anyone who is doing open water swimming. So I hope that as many people as possible decide to participate so that we can get results as good as possible and in the end have something useful for the community.
Within these interviews, was there anything that the swimmers didn't talk about?
Oh, yeah, I think that the situation where I am part of the community, where I'm one of them, played a major role in the sense that they were okay with opening up and sharing some stories that they might not share with like a random researcher. And I think that's the big value that I brought to this. And for instance, talking about some of their mental health situations or talking about relationships and how a marathon swimming affected some of those, but also some like health issues and how they dealt with that. So I think that me being a part of the community helped a lot with building building questions for the interviews, but also later for the interpretation of their answers and in general building the paper. I remember one day I was going through the interviews again and quotes and everything, and I started to cry, like there were tears in my eyes, and I texted my supervisor. I was like, "Do all researchers cry when they read transcripts?" Because things those people say are the things I also experienced. And I wasn't reading just words, I was seeing like scenes in front of my eyes, and I felt the emotion and everything. And I think that that brought something extra to the paper and to the research itself.
So, if someone listening has only done one or two longer ocean swims,
Yeah.
what would do you think would surprise them most about what experienced channel swimmers consider as normal?
Well, it would surprise them what they consider normal, just in general, what they consider normal, because those are not normal people. But I would say, for instance, for me, the boundary gets pushed like there is no end. For instance, now for me, when someone tells me that they did English Channel, I'm like, okay, you and 3,000 more. I know the value of the swim, but you keep like looking, for instance, as I mentioned, Sarah Thomas, and I'm like, okay, but I did, I swam 17 hours, but Sarah swam for like 67. So at least that's me as a person. So it's always like pushing yourself. But I think when it comes to someone who is just getting into the community, I think that considering today's world, they would be the most surprised about the support of the community, how supportive people are of each other, how whoever you ask for the help, you can be like, just send them a message on Facebook or Instagram. I think that 99% of the people will try to help you. How much people are supportive of each other in the sense that everyone is happy for others' success. Then we don't see each other that much as competition, but everyone is doing something for themselves. To be honest, I don't like the moment at the moment where it's being pushed that every swim needs to be some kind of record. And I don't think that's just in marathon swimming. I think that's in general in sport, in endurance sport. But I'm happy that the core group, let's say, of the marathon swimming community is still people who don't care about that, but who care about doing swim for themselves and being part of one of the last, I would think, communities in the world, sport communities, where it's actually about the sport and when where money can't help you. So like your equipment is maybe like, I don't know, 100 euros, and it's a sport where that doesn't discriminate. So you know yourself that some of the most accomplished swimmers, if you see them on the street, you would say, no way, there is no way. And it's just, it doesn't matter the age, the gender, nationality, build. When you step into the water, everyone is the same.
Now, one of the striking things in your paper is how often serious issues are normalised.
Yeah.
How do marathon swimmers decide what's acceptable to push through and what's genuinely dangerous?
Yeah. I think that sometimes, as I said, that line gets quite blurry, and it's very important because of that to have the right crew on the boat, because I think they play a, a huge role, especially in the situations where sometimes swimmers, when they are not well, they can't make really rational decisions, especially if you are close to the finish. It's very hard to pull the plug. That's why it's important that people on the boat are that can stay objective and that have priorities straight. Oh yeah, I wanted to say that there is a saying: "It's a solo swim, but a team effort." It really is like that. You don't do any of these swims without at least three people on the boat next to you, and then many more on land and everything. So I think that those other people, your team, is crucial in the moments when it's being decided if you are pulling out or not.
So, do you think this knowledge about what's dangerous or what we can push through is that learned? Is it absorbed through sort of the cultures of the sport, or is it just earned through the hard way?
I think it's combination of everything, because I think that's why it's also important, as there is not a lot of sources of knowledge that you can get online. You can at one place you can just read about everything. There is, of course, like some articles or different things, but most of the knowledge is gathered by just meeting people and talking to the people that you meet along the way on your swims or wherever you go. So I think that's why it's quite important to really be a part of the community, to get that knowledge. But of course, I learned a lot of things through my own experiences, to making mistakes and things like that.
Is there anything you once accepted as part of the sport that you now see differently as a researcher?
I don't know. I think that my boundary is being pushed to more and more. For instance, when I first learned about Ocean 7, I know that I commented to my mom. I was like, only crazy people do this. Why would someone do this to themselves? Swim in a cold with jellyfish, with sharks, or anything. And then I finished it. So I think that once you get into that world, if it's something that where you find yourself, the boundary keep being pushed further and further. And I think that there is where objective knowledge should play a big role, because emotions can be controlled, and it's very hard when someone wants something badly, to do some swims really bad. The only thing that can stop them is some maybe objective facts that tell them, okay, maybe that's too much for me, or it's too dangerous. So I think that's where research comes into the play, to show people what they can expect and what's real. And because I think that, like in life, people a lot in also in marathon swimming, they get carried away, and they think if they maybe see someone who looks like them, exactly looks like them and everything, and they think, oh, if they can do it, I can do it too. But the background can be very different. So just having all the information and getting prepared as well as you can, I think it's quite important. Yeah.
You talked about your model, the
Mhm.
tide model, as a
Yeah.
non-linear way of thinking about preparation, stress, coping, and recovery. Can you just talk us through that in plain terms for the swimmers?
So it basically said that everything you do affects other stages, because swimmers, I think, often think, okay, swim is finished, and there is, I'm done with that. But they don't realize that swim actually affects how their recovery will go. And the recovery can go for up to, some people said, After some of their swims, for the full recovery took them several months. And that recovery is also under influence of your training, because if you are prepared better, then your recovery will also be faster maybe, or easier. And then again, the learning curve that occurs from experiences that you have during your swim, for example, can then affect how you prepare next time. So, training for some future challenges. So, it's a loop where you get stuck in that loop if you keep doing the swims. But also, I think that swimmers need to be aware that if you keep doing one of those things wrong, it affects everything else, and it can get quite dangerous if you keep doing the same thing, wrong for the long time. It builds up. Let's put it that way. The bad stuff builds up, and I don't think that anyone wants to get out of the sport in the end with serious health issues. My mom always says that her only goal with my marathon swimming is that I stay healthy in the end. And I have to say that I'm quite proud that during all of these years of swimming, I never ended up in hospital after any of my swims. I always say partially it's because I'm quite careful and have my mom to take care of me, but also because I'm Croatian and my mom is very Croatian. So she's the type of person who goes to the doctor just when she's dying. So, so she put the same thing into me. So maybe someone would go to the hospital in some scenarios that I had, but I think that everyone should have as their priority to stay healthy and not to chase records. And because, yeah, sports should be for fun, for health, and for bringing joy to life and not bringing worries to life.
If a coach, a crew member, or an event organizer is listening at the moment, how would you want
Mm.
them to utilize your new model in this space?
I hope that our model, and in the end, when we do all the research and some information we get in the end, that they are useful also for clinicians, because for most of these big swims, you have to do a medical check before the swim. And it's quite, I mean, it's basic, and it counts on that every person is aware of their health issues and they are smart enough to not lie about it, but to have their health on first place. But I would love to see that my research helps future clinicians to know what they should maybe look more into, or to make swimmers aware of certain health risks so that they can make informed decisions better. Yeah, but the same for the coaches, so that they know what's important through preparation, but also, as I said, through the swim itself and through recover later. Because, for instance, a lot of swimmers talked about recovery not just as a physical recovery, but it's like more holistic, because a lot of swimmers experience after finishing a big swim like a emotional drop, like some kind, I don't want to say depression, but like a low, because you finish something and what's now. So if they don't have another swim planned or something else, they get a bit, lost. So I think that for the coaches, that's also important to know, to put into perspective of training, that maybe it's not the most important thing in the world that they get straight back into the full training, but maybe it's more important to for them to again feel the joy of swimming, and just to remember why are they doing that. And for the race organizers, as I said, even though every swimmer signs like a waiver that they are doing it in on their own risk, I think that every night a nightmare for every event organizer is that something happens to some of the swimmers, and then again, them being aware of potential risks makes it much less probable that something bad will happen. But also, if something happens, so that they know how to react and how to recognize things that may happen.
When you've tried to publish this work, you've
Yeah.
aimed high with the journals. You faced some tough reviews. What was that
Yeah.
experience like?
Oh, it was painful. Yeah, so I decided, so I'm type of person who would rather have like try and not succeed than ask what if. So I decided that I would try first with the highest ones, so the top of the top journals, and to see what happens. Unfortunately, nothing happened so far, but I'm not giving up. So getting reviews. First one was actually okay because they said that the research is good and a very interesting subject. That data is interesting, but that they had some other issues with it. But the last review we got was very harsh, and it was someone having a bad day and trying to like. I felt like someone was just like, "Oh, now I'm going to show you how everything that you didn't do good," and it hit me really hard because, as you can see, this PhD is not, as for most PhD students, just a PhD. It's much more for me, and it's quite I'm quite emotionally attached to it because the things I'm writing about in it are things that I went through. So when someone gives you a review that harsh, it hits you hard, and then again questioning yourself if anything that I'm doing is good or if I should just give up or things like that. So when then you told me that the research is really good, the paper is good, I was like, yeah, that's what I needed to hear to bring me some hope. So yeah, so research world is quite harsh, and everyone keeps telling me that, and I'm aware of that. Especially I think when you come from like a smaller country with no real budget or no real system in for certain things, it's hard to sometimes you feel like a fish on a dry land, just gasping for air and trying to find a way. But I have to say that we Croatian people are very good in those situations, making something out of nothing and just figuring out things. So I'm sure in the end that something will come out of it.
I think being a swimmer and the challenges you faced in the water certainly
Yeah.
made you resilient.
Well, it still hurts, you know, emotionally, it hurts. I'm like, yeah, I cried. I'm not going to say that I didn't cry.
Just a few simple ones to finish off.
Mm.
What's your favourite swim set and why?
Mm, I don't have a specific swim set, but I love to swim 200s, like sets of 200s. It's not short enough that you have to sprint, and it's not long enough that it gets like too. I don't know. I don't want to say boring because it's not boring. It's just the right spot for me. I just love swimming for like for instance with a pool boy or paddles like 200s. That's something I like. And in a 50-meter pool, so there is less turns.
When you're swimming for hours, are you a singer or a counter?
Oh, I do everything. Everything that you can think of, I'm doing it from like imagining scenarios. There, I get some like very emotional also scenarios in my head, so I also start crying. I also sing. I count, but I don't count strokes. I count whenever I breathe. I also, when things get hard, either mentally or physically, I talk to myself a lot and, you know, just motivate myself and tell myself how well I'm doing. I also curse myself basically every swim, telling myself why I'm doing this to myself and, and things like that. So a lot of things happen, and I know that I saw a couple of times on social media. It was like a post, swimming is hard, but it's also so boring. But it never gets boring for me. I think it's when you do it for so long, my world in my head is so rich and there is always something happening. So I think that that's actually a beauty of swimming. It's one of the few things that you can do today where there is no distractions of technology or other people, and you are alone with your thoughts. And for instance, for I got some like really good ideas for my PhD or anything that's happening in my life. I get solutions while I'm swimming, during training or during big swims. So I think that being able to swim and being a swimmer it's a privilege in today's world.
And is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you think you'd like to add?
Nothing specific, I think. I would just love to tell to people to be brave and to try new things. But also that being brave doesn't mean not being afraid of anything, but being ready to face your fears. And open water swimming is one of those things that really challenge you in that part. It's just pushing your fears aside and pushing your boundaries. But I think whoever gets into open water swimming or especially marathon swimming community, that there is not a lot of better communities they will find. So I encourage people to chase that English Channel dream or Rottnest. I don't know if it's you don't you can see there is no camera, but I'm currently in my Rottnest Channel shirt, so it's quite appropriate. So I think that even if someone is telling you that something is impossible, just don't listen to them. But check your health first, but don't listen to them.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to finish this conversation. Dina, thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful to hear about some of your swimming experiences and the challenges and the interesting findings that you've had through your research. I really look forward to seeing this work published and the upcoming projects.
Thank you.
My thanks again to Dina for a thoughtful and inspiring conversation, and for reminding us that open water swimming is as much about awareness and learning as it is about endurance. If you found value in today's discussion, please follow or subscribe to the podcast and consider sharing the episode, especially with coaches, swimmers, or anyone interested in open water health and performance. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the water.